Welcome to Success Matters. My guest today is Rachel Torell. Traveling to new places and experiencing different cultures can be a truly transformative experience, allowing us to broaden our horizons, challenge our assumptions, and gain a new perspective on the world. Join us as Rachel shares how travel can expand our minds and enrich our lives. So Rachel, thank you very much for joining the Success Matters podcast. When we met initially, which was a few years ago, you shared the story of how you had moved from the US to the UK, and that was quite a transition in your life. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about that event and how it changed things for you right from the beginning of your career, if you like?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I've enjoyed listening to the podcast. And you've had some really impressive guests, so very honored to be on here. So back in actually 2018, I went to my husband with this crazy idea of moving. And he was like, at that time we were living in Atlanta, Georgia. And he said, are you thinking Denver, Colorado, or maybe California? And I was like, how about London?
Okay.
I was a little bit of a different world, but yeah, I was, an aspiring saleswoman, and I had the pleasure of working with a lot of enterprise sales account executives, and they all had global experience. They all had clients that had, global presence. And I'm a big believer on, how can you, speak to something or work to something if you haven't had that experience yourself? And sadly, as a lot of people attest to that sell in the U.S., it's like there's the U.S. and then there's everyone else. I'm like, well, hang on, that's not very fair. So, just personally, it just felt like a calling. I'm a big believer in that when you're doing something that feels right, like your body almost like hums, like it's like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And as soon as that idea came to light, it was like, yes, we have to go. And it was challenging to get there. There were lots of hurdles that we had to cross and prove that we definitely wanted to go.
Yeah.
And then when we landed in the UK, it's something that we had been fighting for almost, 9 months. And then you do have this moment when you land where you go, oh no, this is very different, have I made a mistake? Like the challenge that I wanted, but I did. I wanted the challenge. I wanted something difficult.
Please tell me it wasn't raining when you landed in.
Oh no, it wasn't raining. I will tell you a funny story. When we landed on like the 26th of December, which is Boxing Day in the UK. Didn't know how big of a holiday that was. And my husband and I were looking for a flat to rent. And so we were like, I start work and, on the 3rd, plenty of time from the 26th to the 3rd to find a flat. And as everyone's like, no one's working. Like, what's wrong with you all? That was a lot of fun. But I think that also kind of sums up in a great way, like, the biggest difference we saw when landing in the UK. I'm this very aggressive American, saleswoman, and I sit down to my first, territory and that I got in the UK, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to completely change who I am. I'm just gonna have to sell completely differently, completely change, me to fit in. And after about 60 to 90 days of banging my head against a wall, and also just dealing with the challenge of moving to a new country, a new job, a new, city, I kind of had this epiphany where I was like, no, if I'm not being me, I'm never going to be comfortable. This isn't going to feel organic. This isn't going to work. And I just kind of went back to being me, which was, yes, I'm politely persistent. And yes, I am genuinely excited to talk to you. And yes, I use the word amazing a lot because I'm American. And it worked. It went back, and it taught me that no matter where I go, one, being uncomfortable is okay. And two, it's okay for it to be hard. Like, even if you ask for change in something hard. But then the biggest thing I think to come out of it was I still had to be true to me, whatever that looked like. And that's the only way to find success, both literal success, but then also just, success and staying true to yourself.
Was this the first time you'd taken that decision to move, to actually go and work somewhere? In fact, was it the first time you traveled outside of the USA when you came to London?
Oh, great question. So I had traveled outside of the USA. I'd actually gone to London when I was 13 on like a school trip. They were like EF tours. And my mother laughed later, crying over a letter like, oh, if we wouldn't have sent you on that trip, maybe you would. It was really sweet. But it was the first time that I'd worked outside of the US, kind of had that idea of even leaving the state of Georgia. At that point, I had just had Southeast as my home. I was very used to that culture and those people. And yeah, it was the first time I was like, let's go. But for whatever reason, I was like, no, let's not go, to the north, or let's not go west. Like, let's go across the pond. So,
right. And you touched on it earlier, little things like not realizing that the day after Christmas in the UK is a holiday, and everything is closed. Everything closes down pretty much over Christmas, except the shops, of course. They stay open. What other cultural differences did you pick up on in those first sort of 30, 60, 90 days of your time in London?
Yeah, I think what was so lovely about it is all of my my colleagues told me too. I had an incredible pleasure of working with such a diversified group of people from both all over Europe as well as Australia, and a lot of Brits. And they all kind of told me, it was an American software company I was working for, and they were like, look, you're selling in Britain now. No one's going to tell you yes or no flat out. Like, it's going to be very polite. And I was like, oh, that's just a stereotype. You guys are wrong. And no, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
The biggest difference in selling was that everyone's so kind and will give you their time, which I think is lovely. But you kind of in the background know that they probably aren't interested, and they're definitely not going to tell you. So there's a lot of that. But I say hindsight, and the positives is it gives you more runway to try to make a sale. They haven't shut you off immediately, and you're not, blatantly going against their objection, which is different.
Yeah.
So that's really nice. I think the other thing, the biggest thing, and the thing we love the most about what we've seen in UK culture, and then equally, I think this kind of feeds into across Europe, is this idea of holiday and taking all of your holiday. It's a terrible trend in the US that you only get 10 days and no one takes them. And it's a badge of pride of, I didn't take my 10 days because I gave myself to the man. But when I showed up to the UK, people actually took their holiday, and they took their holiday. They were not reachable. They did not have email on their phone. They took their time, and when they came back, they came back. And it was really eye-opening because the world didn't go up in flames. Everything was fine. Like, it's just, and for me, I was like, wow. But I did see more of that focus and commitment to taking time off, and the fact that it's 25 days, which if you tell an average American 25 holiday days, they're like, that was really different. And then one other thing I will say too, I think it's really lovely. I know not everyone is a drinker, but the idea of the pub culture, the idea that we all kind of get together, everyone's village, town, square of London has their pub, and it's where everyone comes to meet. It's where everyone meets, the local artist or their future plumber, or, that sort of community built around that building, I think is really special and really unique. So that was really, really lovely. I will give you a con because I'm giving lots of positives.
Yeah.
Especially in London, no one walks on a certain side of the street, and it drove me insane. You never could just stay left, or, like, no matter where you were, someone was coming at you, and it was a game of chicken, and that did drive me crazy.
Yeah. Did you also try talking to people on the tube in London?
There was one time where I was like, oh, yeah, do you want to sit here? And then I very quickly realized, oh, no, that is not where this is meant to happen. And I mean, it is pretty impressive how little eye contact people can make with you. I mean, even in the most jammed tube, you will not make eye contact with anybody.
Definitely not. It's a dangerous thing to do, to make eye contact with someone. Then you might have to engage in conversation. You might actually have to talk. So no, that's not done.
I know. I must also have one of those faces, because I swear when I first moved there, I actually had so many people come up to me and they were like, I'm going to attempt a terrible accent, but they're like, oh, excuse me, is this way to Bishopsgate? I'd be like, I just got here. I don't know. But like, it happened to me all the time. So I definitely have one of those faces that's like, me, like, I'm excited.
And so talking of taking time off then, you recently posted on LinkedIn that you had taken 11 months off to go traveling. So how was that? What prompted it? Where did you go? Tell us all about it.
Oh man, thank you for asking about that, because I love talking about it. So like everybody, we had moved to London. We had this amazing adventure, and then the pandemic hit. And I'm one of the rarities that for me, being a new Londoner, the pandemic was actually really great for me to really dig in and be a Londoner. I talk about that pub culture. That's where we really, felt our local community, and we needed our local community like everybody did. But it did also mean that a lot of ambitious travel that we had was just put on hold, just wasn't happening. And there was so much of the world that we wanted to still see. Equally, around that time, I'd gone through the Women in Sales Awards, was, lucky enough to win some really big awards, get some really big promotions, make some really big sales. And I started to have this moment where I, along with my husband, started to just kind of reflect on it. And we're like, I remember I made a giant sale and it was over, and I was at dinner that night and I was like, this should feel different. Like this shouldn't feel like this. And we started this conversation of, what if we went and just stopped work for the first time ever, coming from that American culture. I would tell a lot of people in the UK, I graduated uni on, I think it was like May 10th, and I started work May 20th. Like I had 10 days off and I was going, which I know a lot of people have that experience, but I would chat with a lot of folks, especially in my office. They'd be like, oh my gosh, you didn't take a gap year, or you didn't take a few months off, or have you ever gone between jobs and just traveled? And I'm like, no. And it's something I love to do. I mean, as a kid, and what sparked the London move. But then I think also at the point where we were in our professional lives, we had kind of realized that we were knocking on the door of a chapter change. We had passed the point of 30, you start to stare down the tube at 35. And it was kind of one of those moments where we realized financially, we realized time-wise, we realized, responsibility-wise, we could go. And it would be a really easy time to do it. And it also would be the first time that we would not know, I would not know, what is next. And so we said, let's go. Oh, it's terrifying, especially for someone like me. That's my whole, I had the pleasure of working with, and I absolutely love her to death, Sophie Steele. She and I would do coaching after the Women in Sales Awards, and still, now. She, was like, you're that person that it's like, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next. And I've actually, since taking the career break, I feel like it's something that women especially tend to do, because it's like we stay focused and we know there's this next thing we need to do. So with the career break, it was like, what if I just quit my job? I didn't know what I was going to do next, and I did what I wanted. And that was the big theme of my speech, was do what you want. Stop asking, what should I do? Stop asking, what could I do? What do I want to do? And the truth was, I wanted to go travel the world before, time slipped away from me.
Right.
And that's what we did. So we took, we turned in our notices, and our jobs were like, are you sure you just don't want to do a sabbatical? Like, are you sure you just want to up and leave? And, because the first thing they think is, oh, you're going to a competitor. It's like, oh, no, I'm just going to travel the world. And, but that was really important for us not to do that, because we wanted to have nothing tied to nothing, if that makes sense.
Okay,
we didn't want any time constraint. We didn't want, I'm the type of person, if I have any job I'm coming back to, much as I'm on holiday, it's going to sit in the back of my mind. And I don't love that about myself. So I was like, no, I've genuinely got to cut ties.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So we had this is a very long answer to your question. Sorry. We had our first 3 months planned. So we knew that for the first 3 months, we wanted to do what we called like slow travel and spend an entire month in a country. So we started in Thailand, and our big to-do there was to get PADI open water dive certified, which we did, which set up a lot of our future adventures. Our second month we spent in Vietnam, and then our third month we spent in Indonesia, but primarily in Bali. Then from there we flew wherever the wind took us and where there was good flight deals. So we went to the Philippines, Singapore, Turkey, Jordan, Israel, Morocco, Spain, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and then Italy. And Italy's where we wrapped up everything and started our next job search.
So the wind literally did take, because I was mapping it in my mind. So you went to the East Far East, and then you came back towards the West. So you went to the South America, then back to Europe, and then to the USA.
Yep, that was it. That was it. So we actually spent the night in the Milan airport on our way to Morocco. So tick that off the life bucket list.
What, spending a night in Milan airport?
Spending a night in the Milan airport. As one does, as everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So were you backpacking? Were you glamping? What was the way in which you traveled?
We laugh and we called ourselves fake backpackers. So we met a few other I'd say like 30, 35-year-olds that we'd show up, and we all did have backpacks. We did all have our 7-liter backpack, my Osprey Fairview, free advertisement to them. I loved it. But we never slept in a hammock, and we always had running water. So I say we were kind of somewhere in between. Did we have hot water? No. There was a lot of nights that we didn't have air conditioning, even being in Southeast Asia. And I think our biggest adventure was, and it was the most brilliant, was when we were in Colombia. We went to this like island in the middle of the ocean, and you just slept windows open. It was kind of a hut, but oh my gosh, you had access to pristine beach. So I would say you would call it backpacking, but if a backpacker heard me, they'd be like, no, they didn't.
Yeah, I understand. You call that backpacking. Did you have flushable toilets everywhere you went?
We did have flushable toilets, and we came very.
That's my number one criteria.
Exactly. We had one place someone was like, "Oh, it's a, eco toilet," and I was like, I love the idea of it. I really do. I don't think I can execute. Yeah. So it was tough, but yeah, flushable toilets everywhere.
And so, what did you over that 11-month period? What did you learn about yourself and about the world in general?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing I learned about myself and what I've told people, and I say this in a very positive light, is I learned that I'm just someone that just has anxiety. It's just who I am.
Okay.
I say that because I spent so much of my life, turning towards my job and saying, oh, well, I must be stressed because of my job, or I must be stressed because of this big sale I have coming up. Right. But actually, when you ripped away my job, when you ripped away a lot of my responsibility, well, then my anxiety just turned into how we're going to catch the ferry from Bali to Nusa Penida. And, what if my husband has something medically go wrong? And if and it made me realize that is actually a personality trait that I just have. Oh. But it's actually such a blessing to realize that. Because a lot of people, might not get that opportunity to say, oh, and point towards this thing that's making them feel that way. But for me, it was really great because now it's something that I know and I can embrace and also, live with, but learn to, love it in its own special way, but also make sure that it doesn't inhibit a lot of the experiences that I have. I think equally the biggest thing that we learned is it was so interesting. I think about our time everywhere. And I think a common theme, and I don't know if people are religious, and I think no matter how you feel either way, but I am a religious person. Mm-hmm. I feel like things and people are put in your life for a reason, and they're little signs and signals from, call it God, call it what you want. But everywhere we went, we met people who were just lovely. Mm-hmm. And all of them had kind of the same premise of, why would I work 40, 50, 60 hours a week? Why would I make all of this cash? Why would I compile all this cash when I would actually be happier being a scuba instructor in Thailand, having a restaurant that closes at 6 o'clock and sending all my friends to my other friend's restaurant? Whenever it says 9:50 and the restaurant closes at 10, by God, we're already closing at 9:50. Just those kind of moments and this idea of, when you have enough to serve you and your own, turn around and give to the community, turn around and give to someone else. Or we had this guy, I hope he listens to this, Steve. He was our PADI instructor, my first stop in Thailand. Mm-hmm. And he, had really just gone through the ranks, worked in kitchens, was living in London. Was really doing it. And then he stopped and started scuba instructing, and he realized he was just getting so much joy. But at the end of our course, with just the biggest smile on his face, he looks at us and he's like, I give the gift of the underwater world, and that means everything to me. Like, I just want to keep sharing that. And I looked at John and I said, when we go back to whatever corporate job, let's remember that somewhere Steve is living his best life and giving the best gift in his point of view. Because it made sense. And it was the biggest takeaway for us, is just having these encounters and starting to ask ourselves, well, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you logging on a Sunday? Like, why are you, what are you hoping to accomplish? And really, I think it helps you, or helps us, circle back to the idea that that's not what we're doing. There are those other pieces in life that you don't have to do that extra because you're already happy where you're at.
That statement by Steve, it's golden, right? I give the gift of the underwater world. It's how can you even top that?
I know. I'm like, you're right, Steve.
Yeah. So what gift are you giving to the world then after having had this experience?
So I've really changed. I say I've really changed. I've molded my North Compass So I think the biggest thing that I hope before I left, if you'd have met me and probably talking to you all, I wanted to be a C-level, because I felt like if I could get to a C-level at a company, have a stage, I could really start to make change in the company. I think I was doing a lot of this dialogue of, I can do what I'm doing now, and I can still continue to make that change now, but I'm just going to blaze my trail to get to this position and make change and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And since leaving and doing the career break, what I hope to gift the world is a woman who is doing her career, but doing it her way. And what I mean by that is, she's not the woman that sits in the room and is like, well, I'm just giving everything. I work on nights, I work on weekends, I'm working myself to death, but by God, I'm the best,
Right.
I want to shut that down. I want to shut down the conversation of, I don't have children, but like, you hear so much like, oh, well, she's a working mother and she crushes her 9 to 5 and she's running the kids, just like, oh yeah. And she's killing herself. She's killing herself trying to do it. So what I hope to gift the world is this idea and this, example of someone who is pursuing life the way she wants. And that does mean also a career, but it also most importantly means the life that we're going to go to the grave with. And what I mean by that is, I had a great opportunity to listen to Arianna Huffington speak at Dreamforce. I did previously work at Salesforce. And she made this statement about, whenever you get to the grave, no one says, oh, Rachel saved the company 22% in costs in 2018, and by God, she made a mean spreadsheet, which is not true, but you get my point. And she's like, no, that's not what you go with. It's the impact you leave on people. It's the impact you leave on the world around you. And what I hope is to help people remember that piece,
right,
and pursue their best lives, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, and it ties in with your Women in Sales Award, right? Because you in your speech you said something pretty similar. Go after what you want. So, having won the Women in Sales Awards, having had that recognition, having now had the travel, what would your advice be to a up and coming woman who's looking to build her career, to develop further? What would your advice be to her? What sort of guidance would you give?
The first thing I would say is take notes from people that are doing the things you like, not doing the things you think you should do. And then take that information and figure out what you want to do and do it that way.
Right.
Don't look at who people are telling you to look at. Find the people that you most align with. And if those people aren't there, then start to create the profile that you want to be and become that person. That's what I would say. Number one piece of advice.
You touched on anxiety as well. And as you were talking, I thought, actually, was your anxiety potentially a hidden superpower? It was your anxiety that drove you to make those big deals because you were thinking about all the things that could go wrong and therefore addressing them and able to make the big deal. Would you say that's a fair reflection or not really?
It's an incredibly fair reflection. You're exactly right. And that's exactly what I mean by having a loving relationship with this. Because I do realize what I do. I was listening to some sales podcasts, and they're like, if you can start to think about what will go wrong. And I'm like, oh, nailed it. Like, I am very good at that. Like, objection handling is probably one of the better things I have, because I'm always thinking about what could be the objection, what is the paperwork that might not be ready? Will the legal be ready to go? Like, that is my superpower.
Yeah.
And I think in a healthy way and harnessed in a healthy way, you're exactly right. It's like, I'm always thinking about what that thing is. It then just, I think more in personal life and business life, it does help me. It really does. But I think in personal life, it's then making sure that those what ifs don't block the fun that you're having right then.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, in the deals, it's definitely my hidden superpower.
And in your personal life, how do you stop that anxiety blocking what you want to do?
Now, it's a great question. I mean, I'm a big believer in, and I think through the pandemic and a lot of people, I love my husband to death, but I'm also a talker when it talks through problems. And I started doing therapy because it's like, I want to talk through these things. I want to understand what's happening, and I want to keep a healthy relationship with my spouse. So I realized very quickly, okay, having someone to talk to is really great, because that's just how I work through things anyway. And then to have someone that can kind of create that healthy mirror back to you of like, this is what I'm hearing. And it's like, ooh, yeah, okay, that's something that could be an inhibitor. But then also too, it sounds really cheesy. Actually, no, I'm going to take that back. It's not cheesy because I believe in it. I'm a big now, and I got this from the travels of morning journaling, just writing down, waking up and being like, this is what I'm feeling. This is where I'm at today. Just no rhyme or rhythm, just writing. And
Yeah.
and it's a sacred book, like it's my book, because these are those organic raw thoughts, but it is incredibly freeing to like get that stuff out, because I feel like when you hold it in is when it starts to become darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
But not every morning's a bad journal. It's just, hey, here's how I'm feeling today. And just being aware of that really changes how the day can go.
And how long do you take journaling? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour?
I was about to say nothing more than 10 minutes, really. It's just to flip open the page and go. I mean, I have a notebook that I work out of anyway. That's my like to-do list, even though I sell technology. I still have a paper to-do list. But this is just, wake up, cup of coffee. I'm a big believer in no phones and no electronics either. Like before this time, like don't let yourself go down those rabbit holes. It's out of bed, whatever your usual, sit down and go. And that could be 3 minutes, that could be 10 minutes, but nothing more than 10.
Yeah, perfect. I think a lot of people will take that advice on, because it's actually really powerful journaling when you start to write things down, whether it's at the start of the day or the end of the day. As you say, you're not keeping it inside you, so it's not, those negative things aren't getting darker and darker, and the positive things, it's a great way to reflect. On those days when you maybe not feeling so positive, you can reflect on that and say, actually, you know what, I did all these wonderful things, as you flick through your journal. So it is a very powerful tool.
Absolutely.
In terms of, so as you know, this podcast is called Success Matters. So
yes.
What does success mean to you?
What does success mean to me? Success to me means this is a really hard answer actually to give like very concisely. So I've done so much talking already.
Don't worry about being concise.
So success for me means staying true to what I want, but doing it in a way that is also doing it the way that I want, if that makes sense. Success to me is realizing that this life is only going to last for so long. So as little time as I can spend wondering what I could or should do, and as much time spending what I want to do, and then putting in a plan to execute against that, that's success. And I think to layer on top of that, and the most important, is realizing that success and being very conscious daily of, is the success something I really want and find my life to be successful? Or is this a thought that's been put in my head by someone else who has defined success differently than me? Because I think, just looking at my life in particular in the last, 33 years, I think I've done a lot of things going, oh, well, this person thinks this and I could do this, that's what will make me successful. But one of the beauties of the career break and then my time in London is actually reflecting on what does success mean to me and try your best not to put any lens of what anybody else defines success as, so you can stay true to it.
A bit like Steve, right? Steve's giving you the gift of the underwater world.
Exactly.
There's no judgment about what he's making or whatever, have the house or other things that people often put in as those judgment things about, is this person successful or not? Well, actually, if I'm giving you the gift of the underwater world, then that's a great success to me.
And you make a great point about Steve and the way he said it, because it was also that belief and love that he knew he had. I think sometimes you meet those people that are like, oh yeah, I'm happy. And they kind of look away and you're like, oh, okay. Like it feels like they've taken that outside world and been like, I know that you don't think I'm successful, but I'm successful, but they haven't yet believed it. To where Steve, with full conviction, looked at us and was like, I am living the best life in the world. Like this, so I think that's also a big part of it, is just having that confidence and that love of it to then share it with others rather than feel like it's different to somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that 100% makes sense. So I ask, a tradition I have on this podcast is I ask a previous guest to ask a question for my next guest. So my last guest asked me to ask you, who are you?
That's a tough question.
That's what I thought when they asked that question. And I thought, this is going to take a bit of time to think about, but let's fire.
I think the best way I know how to answer is I am me and only me. Okay. And there's no one else like me. And that is a very humbling, scary, but also freeing thing. The reason I say that is one of the things I had the pleasure of listening to on my travels was Brene Brown. And she talks about this idea of comes from Maya Angelou, that if you belong nowhere, you belong everywhere. And it's that idea of if you're staying true to yourself and being you genuinely don't belong anywhere because no one else is like you. But in turn, that then means that you belong everywhere because you are a beacon of your own place of view. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say, I am, who are you? I am me. And it doesn't look like anybody else. And that's wonderful, but scary, but amazing.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And you're right. Each of us is unique. We often forget that those little things that make us who we are is really what makes us who we are. And there's a reason why we get on with people and people engage with us. It's because we're all so different and individual. So yes, it's that was a difficult question. When she asked me to ask that, I did think, oh, okay, what does that, wonder what the reaction will be, but you've answered it really well. So thank you, Rachel. Do you have a question? It's a difficult one. Yeah. Do you have a question for my next guest?
I do have a question for your next guest.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with this, so I'm going to ask them.
Okay.
What is their morning routine?
What is their morning routine? Okay.
Or if they have one. Because I'm very curious. I'd love to know people's morning routines.
And so you touched on it earlier. You journal. What else do you do as part of your morning routine?
Caffeine, for sure. Caffeine is part of my morning routine. But no, I also try to do some sort of physical activity. So Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, I get up first thing, brush my teeth, journal, head to Orange Theory Fitness. All right, shout out to them again, free promo, love them. And then on days that I'm not doing Orange Theory, it'll be some sort of either walking or even if it's just pacing, something to just like kind of get my blood and body going. And then it's the journaling, and then it's starting my day. But my big belief in the morning is no phone. Like I do not have my phone. I charge my phone outside of my room. I'm lucky in that I don't have it on right now because it's actually charging. I wear my Apple Watch at night, so I just get my little nice vibration, turn it off. But But yeah, I'm a big believer in no phone until post that journaling activity. Okay. And it's really big for me.
And why is that? What have you found by not looking at the phone first thing?
I think the phone, you're diving into somebody else's world, and it's hard to really listen to yourself. Okay. I've also read and talked to a lot of friends who have done this, and then after practice can confirm it just spikes your anxiety rates already first thing in the morning, because what's the first thing you're diving into? Work emails. Okay. Second thing, you're diving into someone else's Instagram, Facebook life. Okay. Yeah. It's like you just lose focus immediately on you and you're somewhere else. And I can say and attest, like, having had done that in my mornings, it's completely changed my like peace and rhythm through the day.
Yeah. And I'm of an older generation than you, where mobile phones weren't so prominent. And so it's not a habit that I had developed, but recently I found myself starting to look at my phone first thing in the morning, and I very quickly stopped myself for the very same reasons you said, that it just sets you off on the wrong path, or a different path to what you had planned for the day ahead.
Absolutely. We agree.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to hear. I can't wait to hear if your next guest is the same way. I can't wait to hear their morning routine.
Yeah. I'm a halfway space and say, yes, I get up at 4:45 in the morning. I have a shake of like whatever green vegetables and things, and go do yoga and meditation. Let's see what they say. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah. It is something I'm fascinated with, though. I love I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and he does like Tools of Titans, and he always asks people their morning routine. Yes. And it now has made me fascinated. I did masterclass, and it was like the Anna Wintour creativity and leadership class. And she was like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I have a game of tennis. I'm like, what? Like, do you have lights on the tennis court? Like, I'm so confused. I mean, it's fascinating to hear people how they start their day. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, indeed. So, Rachel, we're at the top of our time now. So thank you very much for sharing your story. If people want to find out more or get in touch, what's the best way for them to do so?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the time. This is really fun and such a great way to start my day. If people want to find me, first things first, connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to have a chat. If anybody wants to have a career break, I am happy to have that conversation, and I prioritize those coffee chats. So please do reach out. We also do have a travel YouTube video. We're actually still editing those videos. It's a lot harder to edit videos than I remember. So that is called the Traveling Torells, traveling with one L. I always misspell that. And then Torells are with two. So Torell. So we're on YouTube. We do have a blog page. The blogs are a little light, but we're hoping in the future to kind of transition that more to here's where we went, here's a bulleted list, here's what we suggest, just to kind of continue to share our experiences with everyone. So the YouTube, I think we're about halfway through the country, so we've got half to go. So subscribe and stay in the know of what our next adventures videos are.
Great. So thank you once again, Rachel. It's been great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Really had a blast.
If you'd like to find out more about how you can find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.